Good evening, everyone. My name is Tim Grant. I'm your host for this evening's webinar, and it's my great pleasure to have Dave Wilson from Facing the Future as our presenter this evening. You're in for a real treat. I just want, before we get started, or before I introduce David, I want to give you a sense of what we'll be doing for the next 60 minutes. And for those of you who've been on previous webinars, hold tight. You've heard this before. But essentially, David will present for about 30 minutes. We'll stop here and there to ask you questions of yourselves. But essentially, at the end of 30 minutes, up will come a slide that where you can type in any question you might have for Dave, and I will retrieve them in a back office and forward them and articulate them to Dave for his replies. But you don't actually have to wait. If you have a burning question or a comment about anything you hear over the next 30 minutes, you can take advantage of the chat room that's in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen. And you'll see below the chat room there's a little box that says main room, and to the right of that is a blank horizontal box. So that's in the blank horizontal box, that's the place to type in a question or a comment, or if someone else asks a question and you know the answer, you can type in the answer in that box and just hit enter, and it'll go to for everyone to see. If you just want to reply to one individual, if you go to the scroll bar beside main room, you'll see everybody's name, and you can send them a private question or comment as you wish. But I mention all of this because what has been a surprise and great fun in most of our webinars is very active conversation that takes place in the chat room during the presentation. So please feel free to take advantage of it. In fact, I think, Dave, we're going to ask people to put some comments in there in a few moments. So we'll start off that way quite early. I should also mention that this webinar is being co-sponsored between Green Teacher and Facing the Future, and as a result, we've had a huge registration. I think something like 440 people signed up for this webinar, which is higher than any other that we've had so far by just a little bit. And while many fewer will actually be participating tonight, it's our experience that probably up to three times as many people who participate tonight will be doing the archive that will be made of this this next 60 minutes and over the next few weeks. And we'll be sending all of you an email tomorrow that has the URL for the archive, so you can share it with others. And I will say that Dave is an energetic presenter, and I will now start introducing you in a second, David. But and he's packed a lot into this presentation, and don't feel distracted if there's something you really wanted to copy down, and Dave's gone past it, because as of noon tomorrow, the archive will be available to you, and you can go and view any small piece of it. You can fast forward to the piece you might have missed or want to go to. You don't have to view the whole 60 minutes of the archive. Again, before I introduce Dave, I should say to many of you who are new to Green Teacher, we are a small nonprofit magazine that we have been publishing for about 20 years. It's a place where youth educators working inside and outside schools share their best and most innovative learning strategies, working with kids from 6 to 19. And we have had the great pleasure in the last 10 years of publishing 6 books, and those are, if you're not familiar with either our magazine or books, I would invite you to please go to our website afterwards to have a look and consider taking out a subscription. One other quick point of business I forgot to mention. Dave and I, if we get lots of questions and we haven't had time to answer them all at the end of the 60 minutes, we will actually interrupt but not stop the question period by asking all of you to fill out sort of an end of session evaluation. And 2 people who fill out that evaluation tonight will be awarded a free 1-year digital subscription to Green Teacher as an incentive, and we hope that all of you will take advantage of the evaluation to give us your candid feedback. That's always very helpful to us. So, without further ado, Dave Wilton is the Assistant Outreach Director facing the future in Seattle. He develops and conducts educator workshops and webinars. He oversees the organization's peer educator network, and supports its educator, community, and service learning outreach programs. He's presented over 100 times at conferences, schools, universities, and zoos, and community events to students, service, and teachers. And but before joining Facing the Future, Dave worked as a classroom teacher, a county land use planner, bike mechanic, and volunteered as a small claims court mediator. Suffice it to say, there's many facets to Dave Wilton. David, welcome, and thanks so much.
Wow, thanks for the introduction, Tim. It's really a pleasure to be here, so hello and welcome to everybody, whether you're joining us from the East Coast or the West Coast of North America, or maybe you're further east and west from there on another continent. So greetings to you all. And Tim, many thanks to you and everyone at Green Teacher for putting on this webinar series and for inviting Facing the Future to be part of it with all the other groups that have gone before us. It's an honor and a pleasure. And to all of you, thanks for joining us here today for the next hour. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to tune in and interact and hopefully share through the opportunities we have today. I think webinars, they're a great way to gather people together from across the globe, and I know they're also available online afterwards. But I think just like there's still something to sitting in a room full of people at a conference or a theater, there too is something about gathering together even virtually in real time, and I want to honor and thank you all who are here today with us for joining in. So up there on the screen you see the roadmap for today, and just a few housekeeping measures. You'll probably notice, and as Tim mentioned, I've packed a lot of things into here, so I'm going to probably tend to talk fast and maybe faster than I should. But I still get some of those same nerves, I guess, before I present an in-person session. So I have a lot of ground to cover that I hope to cover in the next 30 minutes that we have. And while the fast and furious approach perhaps isn't the best practice to demonstrate, but I at least want to endeavor to offer enough variety so that everyone here today and the people who tune in later on will have a chance to walk away with at least one new piece of information, so you all can have something to keep thinking about and acting on afterwards. So whether it's checking out a web resource, reading an article, or trying out a lesson in your classroom. As Tim mentioned, the webinar will be archived, so you get the information in an email tomorrow from Green Teacher. So as you said, if you miss anything, you can come back to it later, or you can also forward it along to anybody else that you think could benefit from it. And likewise, even though it probably won't be as useful, if anybody wants a copy of the slides, you can get in touch with me through email. And one last thing, I'm in an older building in downtown Seattle, and I'm a block away from a fire station. So you may hear some sirens in the background, and my apologies in advance if that happens. So looking up at the agenda there today, you'll see I'm going to sketch out just briefly what education for sustainability is, or sustainability education. And I know many of you are familiar with that, so I won't spend a lot of time on that. I'm going to spend the majority of the time we have here today sharing examples of what other teachers and educators are doing and providing tie-ins to some curriculum resources you could use, and then we have that whole half an hour for Q&A at the end, and even longer if we need it, given the number of people who may be joining us. So before we start, though, I'd like, by way of a question, to kind of get the ball rolling here. And if people who are game to answer the question, it says, in 50 years, I want the world to be. So if you want to take a stab at that and just type in your answer in the chat box there, the short, few 3 words or a short sentence to give everybody else and myself and Tim a sense of what your vision for the world in 50 years might be. So I'm going to keep talking while folks are doing their thinking about what they want the world to be like in 50 years. And I usually precede this question when I'm doing this in workshops with the question of, in 50 years, I think the world will be, as a way of contrasting and comparing our thinking to how we want the world to be. But in the interest of time, we're going to cut straight to the optimism and ask this question. But as you're typing in your responses, certainly think about how it's just changing the question from thinking to wanting might change your answers. And I've seen some fun answers here already: livable, peaceful, happy, fair, a viable habitat for all humans and species. So some, positive thoughts, I think, and the challenge for all of us here today is to think about how do we then take these visions and articulate them in our own lives, but also help our students articulate their own visions and find them to begin with, for that matter. So thanks for everybody who's writing those in. I see a few familiar names of people already, so it's fun to see some familiar faces, so to speak, online. And as you're finishing up that or just thinking about yourself, I want you to also think about, what makes just this question engaging. And I think for myself, it's certainly engaging from the standpoint of, I'm going to be living in the future, hopefully, and I would like the future to be in some way, to meet my needs, so to speak. And so being able to have that vision of what you want the future to be like is one way of working towards that in your own personal life or in your community or in the world as a whole. And so I think this is a nice way of jumping in and also even asking our students, if you want the world to be a certain way, what do you have to do to get it that way? And that's in part what I'm hoping to share and impart with you today is talking about that vision of the future and how education for sustainability can be a way of helping students create that vision and then act on it. So jumping back to the content at hand, I want to just briefly introduce the organization I'm with, Facing the Future. I know many of you are probably familiar with it already. We're a nonprofit. We're based in Seattle, Washington, and we've been around for just over 15 years now. And we're we use nationally in North America, but also worldwide. Our goal is to engage students in learning by making academics relevant to their lives. So we develop curriculum resources for grades K through 12 and all the core subject areas, and we're really seeking to empower students to think critically, to develop a global perspective, to become globally competent, and also participate in positive solutions through things like service learning for a sustainable future in their personal life, in their communities, and worldwide. And all the materials that we create, they're aligned in the U.S. to our state's education standards, and a good majority of our lessons are available for free online. And just a couple of things I'll point out, and I'll hopefully have time to come back to, is we have I'm hearing some feedback from someone, if that's okay. We have a curriculum finder on our website, so you can locate resources from the homepage there, and you can type in what you want to look for a specific lesson plan or grade band, and it will pull up resources and examples that you can use in your own teaching. And that's our web address there, facingthefuture.org. But that's enough about us for now, and let's get back to what we're going to be talking about today. And starting off with that slide there, you're probably thinking, you're looking at this mobile and thinking, global issues. I thought we were going to be talking about sustainability, which is a good question. And I wanted to start off with this graphic because I think it's a nice way to demonstrate, how global issues and sustainability are interconnected. And if you were going to imagine sustainability as simply another issue, where would it perhaps hang on this mobile? Because in some ways it wouldn't necessarily fit. It's not so much an issue as it is perhaps a way of thinking and acting. And looking at the mobile, you can see it looks like all these items are perhaps hanging in isolation, but we know that mobiles, they're an interconnected system, and if one piece gets heavier or lighter or changes position or is removed or added, the whole system has to compensate to form a new equilibrium. So if we pull one piece, the entire system is affected. And we use this graphic with students and in our professional development workshops to visually describe the interconnections of global issues. And these interconnections can seem negative. People are using up non-renewable resources too quickly, and what are we going to do about that? But if we shift our thinking, like that question that we just answered was, how do we want the world to be, it allows us to see the leverage points in these systems and these points, these opportunities to affect positive change in the system. And these changes, be they personal, local, or global, they can help keep the system in balance. So not only does it help make connections between local and global issues, but it also allows students to see that they can have a positive ripple effect on lots of local and global issues when they find leverage points in this system to make change. So the definition of sustainable development is one that's, it's certainly been defined lots of different ways. The definition you see there, meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their needs, that came out in 1987. So this is a definition from the United Nations Commission document called Our Common Future, sometimes referred to as the Brundtland Report. It's probably the most common and well-known definition of sustainability, and we like to use it because it's relatively succinct. I think there's certainly others, though, that are worth honoring. Here, in North America, for example, a common one is the definition of the Iroquois Confederacy's principle of planning for the seventh generation. And there are doubtless countless others, examples from through time and place of cultures and societies and nations that have incorporated similar thinking. So an age-old concept with a relatively modern-day definition there before you. So the diagram you see there is what we call our three-ring Venn diagram, and it's looking at what sustainability is about, those component parts. And this is the one slide I'm going to spend defining this, and then we're going to move on from this. But if you look at it, sustainability is concerned with balancing the impacts, positive and negative, of these three legs of the sustainability stool, as some people call it, the environment, economy, and society. And it's sometimes referred to in business as the triple bottom line. So the goal of sustainability is to keep our environmental house in order while we're maintaining a healthy economy and the kind of society that supports individual well-being. And I think for better and for worse, we've really become aware in the last 2 years how globally sustainability requires all three of these things to be taken into consideration, and what happens when one gets out of balance, when that mobile maybe gets out of equilibrium. So by hopefully finding ways to balance these ideas, we build a foundation for a truly sustainable community and the people in the planet that can benefit from it. So this framework can be used to assess the impacts of products or activities, to evaluate whether it'll allow people in the future to have the same opportunities and to do things as all of us do today. And so whether it's buying that morning cup of coffee and whether or not you brought your own cup for it, to deciding how to vote in your next municipality's election, you're in essence evaluating these impacts in these three spheres and weighing if they balance out to allow future generations to meet their needs while still meeting the needs of the present. And with that in mind, I'd like to get a sense of what people are already doing. So there's a question that we have up there. Tell us what state you're from, or province or country, if you want to do that, which is a 2 or 3 letter initial. And then if you have a story to share, briefly describe what you're already doing with your students on the theme of sustainability. So I'm going to pause for a minute and give people a moment to gather their thoughts and type in the answers in this box there you see on your screen, and when you're ready, just click submit. And after a little while, we'll move on from this, and Tim is going to collate some of these, and we'll come back in a few slides and give him a chance to share what some of those highlights might be. So apologies if not everybody's story or sharing gets brought to the fore right now, but I appreciate you doing so, and it's illuminating for all of us to hear what it is. So when I do this in person, I usually ask people to pair up and share what they're doing, and then we bring some of these examples forward to the group. But today, the goal is to keep it relatively brief so Tim can squeeze in as many examples as he can. So there's an exercise in brevity, I suppose. It doesn't necessarily need to be a 140-character tweet, but you get the idea. So we'll keep it open for a few more seconds here, and then we're going to move on to the next slide and the core of what we're here to talk about today.
And the other point, I'll just jump it back in here, that if by chance you're in the midst of typing something and Dave moves the slide forward as he has to momentarily, you can do as others are already doing, is you take advantage of the chat room and type your thoughts in there, and we'll try and follow there as well.
Yeah, that's right. And thanks for that reminder, Tim. And the chat room is there for us to use all the time. So if I'm saying something and you have a question about what I was saying, or if you want to bring a question to the group, or if this reminds you of something else, or if you have a website you want to link to, the chat box is a great place to do that for everybody. It's a nice back channel, as they call it, to keep the conversation going if you have an idea or get tired of listening to me. So I'm going to go ahead and close this out and move on to the next slide, and hopefully everybody who wanted to has had a chance to put in their short story there. So let's move on to what we're really here to talk about today, which is education for sustainability and doing a little of it or doing a lot of it. And my hope here is to give you some examples of what that can look like. So why sustainability and why educate for sustainability? And what you're going to see there are those kind of main bullet points. The first one, increasing student engagement and achievement. The other one is building on essential skills. And for the first one, we've certainly seen in our own experience that students who are engaged are more likely to be on track for achieving, be it on an assessment or in life. If you're engaged in your studies, you're more likely to be paying attention and absorbing what is there. And we really feel like, and as many of you have probably found, sustainability in all of its contexts and forms offers a way for students to really get involved in issues that relate to their own lives, which in making it personal, I think, makes it more meaningful. Essential skills for the 21st century, those are some catchphrases that we certainly hear a lot, and that can mean a lot of different things in a lot of different places, but I think that the gist of it there is that things like creative thinking, critical thinking, understanding how systems work, and collaborating and being able to communicate and understand different perspectives, those are all skills that certainly aren't new to the 21st century, but they're ones I think we're all finding are becoming more important as we have to work across different cultures and communities and understandings and just geographies. So education for sustainability involves helping students develop these strategies and skills and habits of mind that enable them to participate as 21st century citizens on a sometimes shrinking planet with tremendous environmental, economic, and social challenges. It also, focuses on personal and doable solutions. So there's fostering those community connections and connecting students to their communities through things like service learning and project-based learning. And I think more importantly, as many of us know, it's just good teaching. It's anytime you have pedagogically sound curriculum that's engaging for students, it makes your life easier as a teacher in the classroom or as an administrator. And if your students are engaged, they're more likely to achieve academically, and that's something that we all care about. So high-quality, sustainable education materials that are aligned with standards, they help teachers connect their students to real-world issues, and they support the teaching of core academic content. So it's a way to develop student skills that we talked about before, and it's just a way to also develop connections and partnerships to your community. So let's move on and talk about some different ways that this can look. And I want to give you 4 different kind of main subjects or headings that we're going to be talking about here. So looking at sustainability as its own subject, as a context for teaching core subjects or for projects, and also at the larger district or organizational level, so to speak. So as you'll notice as I go along, even with just these 4 categories, there's significant overlap between them. Now, I work for Facing the Future, and so therefore I'm more familiar with our materials, so that's what I'm going to be talking about today. However, I think it's important to note that there are many other resources and organizations out there, many of which you've seen featured as part of Green Teachers webinar series, and we all come at this from slightly different perspectives and missions, which means that all of you in the audience get the benefit because you can pick and choose from what we have to offer. So, our website, Green Teacher Magazine, and their website, they can provide you with links to many of these resources, and I can also provide you a list of some of those materials if you want them, and they'll be one that you'll get also at the end of this. So get in touch with us or go to our websites, and you can find out more about all of those. So the first way we're going to look at this is sustainability as a subject, so to speak, and the way to think about this is it's where we're bringing to light those interconnections between environment, economy, and society as a primary goal. It's a way of priming your thinking. And as a way of doing that, I have a question for you that leads into what we're going to talk about, which is thinking about what you may have done earlier this morning and if you took a shower or not. So the question that's going to come up is going to ask you, how long was your shower? And I don't see that's coming up, so maybe we'll skip to the next slide. Oh, there it is. So if you think back to your morning, which may have been a long time ago or it may have been not too long ago, depending on where you're at, how long of a shower did you take? And there's no need to share your answers with the group, but if you think about where you might stand, for example, for me and my wife, we have a 1-year-old son at home, so taking a shower is usually an exercise in speed with those rare times when one of us allows the other to indulge in a longer shower and come up with some justification for using the extra water. But I asked this question as a way of introducing an example that deals with water and where it comes from and how we deal with it. And that is a unit that was created by Jessica Levine, a science teacher here at Eckstein Middle School in Seattle. And she asked her students a variation of this question as a way of combining the study of solubility in her science course with sustainability and the issues of access to clean water and sanitation. So all of the 6th grade students at this school researched this question in one aspect of creating clean water or treating wastewater or treating stormwater as a way of learning about solubility and understanding its role in bringing us clean water and keeping us healthy. So her unit is called the Clean Water Challenge, and she won an Amjad Award for Science Teaching Excellence for this project. And you can go to her website, which is going to come up on the next slide here. It's greenlevine.wordpress.com. And I'm going to save us some time and encourage you all to go to her website so you can learn more about the Clean Water Challenge. You can watch a video about it and see the other tools she's developed for teaching the science of sustainability. It's an impressive project, and rather than try and tell you about it, I'm just going to encourage you to go to her site. You can hear firsthand from her students and from Jessica and from her fellow 6th grade teachers about how the Clean Water Challenge works. And you can also read about Jessica in our classroom examples section on our website, facingthefuture.org. One of the things that Jessica included in her Clean Water Challenge as an extension for this is a piece from a downloadable lesson from our site called Every Drop That Counts. And part of the lesson involves using a gallon of water to demonstrate all the water on Earth, and then getting down to not much more than a tablespoon for all the fresh water that's readily accessible for human use. And there are other components of that lesson that you can get if you download it there. But the idea is to have students connecting, their own lives and water in their own lives to the situation of other people and water around the world. And that's part of what she uses in the Clean Water Challenge. The next example is jumping up to high school, and this is Lakes High School, which is just south of Seattle here in Washington on the west coast of the U.S. And the teacher, Daryl Canada, designed a world-long course as a collaborative experience for her students to explore global issues and sustainability and effective governance, and looking at peace and conflict and how and why people address global issues through different personal and structural solutions. So the class is comprised of 3 projects, and students demonstrate their learning from each through an oral presentation and a reflection. The class starts off with a reading from one of our student books, It's All Connected. The background reading prepares them to participate in a model UN in which students act as country delegates, and they write and present resolutions that address specific global issues. And then they move on to a different unit, Unit 6 from It's All Connected, and they use that as a springboard for a section called Deep Space 3000, in which students design a spaceship that's going to leave Earth for 3,000 years and hopefully return with healthy, happy inhabitants. And the class culminates with a project called Creating Our Future Action Plan. And after selecting an issue from the Model UN goal, students answer the questions, how do we create a just and humane world? And by using an action plan, they use an action planning model and visualize their desired future, kind of like we briefly did in the beginning. They identify objectives and develop a plan for actually addressing their chosen issue locally and globally, and then go about finding a way to implement their vision through a service learning project that they create. And that one component there, the Deep Space 3000 part, is a way for students to explore the idea essentially of Earth as a closed system. So they have to create a spaceship, and on that spaceship they're responsible for addressing in their design things like oxygen, food, and waste, and quality of life, and governance, and how are they going to manage the water cycle and the oxygen cycle, and feed themselves and not have waste that they can't deal with. So they're creating this a system to live in a closed system, so to speak, just like planet Earth is. And it's a way for them to come to understand how closed systems work and what it means to sustainably live within a closed system. Moving on, I'm going to pause here and check in with Tim if you want to give us an update on some of the things that people are already doing when they answered that question previously. Tim?
Dave, I've been actually furiously working in the back room because so many of you gave such great suggestions here. I literally was, I've got 3 pages here. I've only printed out the first one, but I will first of all, what's exciting is that we have people, I think, from 4 Canadian provinces, Nova Scotia, Quebec, Ontario, and British Columbia. We have lots of folks, of course, from Washington State and California, but really lots also from Georgia, North Carolina, Maine, Massachusetts, and I'm going to say another 20 states in between. On top of that, what's also quite exciting, we have people from Singapore, Malaysia, and Guam who are on this call, so it's really an international webinar. And as for the kind of activities you're doing, one person leads her school green team. Another does a freshman composition course on water issues. Another person does a main program with adults. But one of the topics is how parents can raise environmentally aware kids. In Singapore, you're opening a new school with the goal of being the most sustainable school of its kind in the world. That's a wonderful goal. In Washington State, someone who's a pre-service teacher educator and who's looking to become better prepared. And someone else works with a California nonprofit doing environmental service learning projects with 6th to 12th graders. And in New York State, it's school garden and alternative energy education. And I'll just jump randomly to another one, starting a recycling program at a rural elementary school in North Carolina. We could go on and on, but we've got a rich group of people on this call who are already doing enormous and diverse, wonderful collection of activities.
Great. Well, thanks, Tim, for sifting through all those, and thanks for everybody for taking the time to share them. I hope to be able to look at all of them when we're done here. That's one of the challenges of doing this way, I suppose, but it's great that everybody has the opportunity to at least share. But I wanted to ask that question as a way of reminding us that everybody here in some way or another is already involved in integrating sustainability on some level, certainly into your own lives, but also into your teaching practice. And with that in mind, let's jump back in, and I want to talk about the next one, which is sustainability as a context. And it sounds a little more vague, and the context here can take lots of different forms. And the first one I'm going to talk about is as a context as more of a whole school level with a school, Explore West, that we've worked with here in Seattle for a number of years, and I've had the good fortune to have them as a partner. So Explore West, it's a middle school in West Seattle, so a suburb of the main downtown core. And each year the school picks a sustainability theme. And so they've done this for I think almost 10 years now. And I'll share with you some of the themes that they've chosen. And they choose a different theme before the beginning of each year, and then the subject teachers find ways to weave the theme into their courses, and students do presentations about the themes and what they've learned about them. So classes participate in service learning projects related to the theme. One year, they chose global health as a theme, and so they had students participating in Bead for Life parties to raise money for AIDS or women battling AIDS in Uganda. It culminates with a day-long school-wide fair in the spring where students participate in activities related to the theme, and they present projects they've been working on. And each department at Explorer West uses sustainability as a lens or as a context through which students can examine the particular discipline. And they have all kinds of essential questions they may ask. In English, they may be looking at, what sustains an individual or a society in a family or a community. In history, they might be looking at, where in previous societies have they made decisions that were supporting sustainability or not that led to the crash of their societies. So there's lots of different ways that they incorporate this. And I want to move along and talk about some of them. So the other ones that they have is they have a campus advisory groups that students are responsible for the recycling systems, and they also compost all of their food waste. They do certain things around certain days of the week. They have one they call, I think, Frostbite Fridays, where they keep things a little bit cooler. In times past, they've had no microwave Wednesdays as a way of saving a little bit of energy. And they also incorporate service into their learning on several different levels, such as working with a neighboring elementary school, doing wetlands restoration, doing invasive species removal at a local park, and also involved in an organization called Seattle Youth Garden Works. And they also have reading and writing buddies and recycling buddies at Westside Elementary, another neighborhood elementary school. And they're involved in their community doing neighborhood cleanup, and also as part of their outdoor education component, they work with the Washington Trails Association doing trail maintenance on trails and parks around the state. So a lot of different things going on at Explore West. So they've managed to use sustainability as a context for as a lens for their studies in incorporating sustainability into their classrooms. Just as an example for how they integrate sustainability in their curriculum for their annual themes and festivals, in a previous year they did global health as a theme, and so in the pictures you can see clockwise from the top left, there's a student zine that was created about water. You see a student participating in a hunger banquet that the school put on for students and families, and you can learn more about those from Oxfam. There's an example of a student-led activity exploring life expectancy as a way of assessing the health and quality of life in a country. Student-led presentations about global health issues, and then down in the middle bottom you see students participating in a water walk to understand what it would be like if you had to walk for several hours each day to get clean water. And there's a guest speaker from an NGO, Water First International, based here in Seattle, talking to students about their work. And even more recently, they had a sustainable design as a theme in a previous year, and Ben Wheeler, a teacher at Explore West and a co-author of some Face in the Future materials, had an article in Green Teacher magazine last fall. The article was Sustainable Design for a Bountiful Future, and that's I think a great resource, a great article, and maybe a great reason to subscribe to Green Teacher magazine perhaps. So I want to share with you a couple examples of how they've incorporated it more directly by sharing some of the work they've done in their advisory groups. And as part of their work in setting the context for sustainability, they use their advisory groups to focus on it. And so I want to share with you some of the samples of how they've taught these using a few Facing the Future lessons. And the first one there is called, Is It Sustainable? And if you remember back to that 3-ring Venn diagram we had at the beginning, what you're going to see coming up on your screen is a comparison of 2 apples. And students are asked to evaluate those apples in terms of economic, environmental, and societal sustainability. And as you look at the information, you'll see there's some trade-offs with these apples. Apple A looks like it might have fewer pesticides, maybe it's organic, but it might have a larger carbon footprint as it came from somewhere far away. And Apple B probably has a smaller carbon footprint and supports the local economy better, but perhaps maybe isn't as healthy for the soil with the pesticide use. So no easy answer. It's a great situation, and that's why this lesson, I think, provides an engaging way to look at the sustainability of decisions and actions that we take. So, be it buying an apple, voting for a candidate, or deciding where to live or work, on some level, those 3 aspects of sustainability play a role and can guide us. Another lesson they did is one called Watch Where You Step, which just briefly is a way of having students identify the components of an ecological footprint by creating a web diagram of the resources they use in their everyday lives and the mark or the footprint that this consumption leaves on the planet. So the activity emphasizes the interconnectedness of lifestyle, population, environmental impacts, and focuses on solutions to reduce ecological footprints. So students are asked to think about, what are the environmental, economic, and impacts of their lifestyle, and what would be the consequences if everybody lived the way they did, and what are some ways that they could, reduce the impacts from one of their favorite meals or objects of clothing or modes of transportation. And so I'm going to show you next some examples of student work from Explore West that look at spaghetti sauce and hamburgers, and you can see how the students chose to interpret their web diagrams there. So 2, great interpretations of what goes into making these things, and you get a sense of students' understanding of what goes into getting them to their front door, so to speak. So they're then asked to think of 10 different ways that they could reduce the impact of this and thereby shrink the ecological footprint of these particular items. So we're going to move along, and I want to be aware of the time here. It looks like we've got about 3 minutes to go, if I'm correct there, Tim. So I'm going to probably end up skipping a few of these, but I want to give you a couple more examples. So we're going to talk about sustainability more as a project. And one example I have to share with you is from a school called Community Learning Center East, which is on the east coast of Florida near Daytona. And the lesson comes from us from the Real World Math book that Facing the Future has. And the teacher, Amy Spees, who used it, said when we talked to her that she used the lesson to reinforce the concept of area and transformations, and it became a catalyst for a school-wide native habitat project. So they did the work from the student book, and then they went outside, looked at the schoolyard, and brainstormed and looked at it and thought, this has a lot of weeds and there's no green stuff in it, and how could we create a native drought-resistant habitat in our own schoolyard. And the language arts teacher got involved, and the students did writing and research, on native plants and habitats. They got publicity in the local paper, and the kids really took ownership for the project and felt some pride in their work. And as it expanded and grew, it became a common experience for the students, and they were had to work together towards a common goal of creating this habitat sanctuary. So it involved math, language arts, the community, and also as a showcase for them to work with their community and show what they did. And as Amy said, doing this wasn't really extra work or an add-on. It was just a replacement of less effective materials for her. So it engaged her students and also made the academics more relevant for them. Another one I'll show briefly is from Florida also, actually, which is Edward White High School. And this was a project that engaged students in an interconnected instruction looking at reading and writing and science and social studies using another resource we have called Making Connections, which is for English language learners and striving readers. So the students led an environmental group called the Green Champions, and they completed a quarterly community and school-wide outreach project that focused on something like recycling or reducing or reusing and what she called rethinking. And I think that's a great one because the rethinking in some ways comes first before everything else. And so students kept a video journal and shared what they learned through the video presentations to their parents and to their peers. And the last thing, I'm going to close with a final example, which is looking at sustainability from a district or organizational perspective, and that's more, with the physical plant of greening the facilities and looking at cost savings and and as we've sometimes coined it, moving from the boiler room to the classroom. So one example is the Gladstone School District, which is just outside Portland, Oregon, not too far from Seattle here. And it's their Gladstone Center for Children and Families. So it's a Head Start and kindergarten combined with a host of community partners to support community health. And they repurposed an existing supermarket that was sitting vacant through a partnership, and it's now sustainable from the physical plant side of things. The district's been able to incorporate green building methods and solar into its planning, and it's sustainable from the societal standpoint in that they're providing community services. It's kind of a one-stop shop for children and adults for education and mental and physical well-being. So it's a nice way of having it in the classroom but also in the community. And I'm going to skip ahead just a little bit here in the interest of time and just briefly mention one, which is one of the reasons why I suppose we're all here today, which is that this is the decade of education for sustainable development, if you didn't know it. So it's going to be over pretty soon. The UN declared this in 2005, and as part of that, most countries around the world have started partner organizations, which in the U.S. is the U.S. Partnership.org, and in Canada is Learning for a Sustainable Future. And so there you can go to find out more about all of those. There's national standards for education for sustainability. They have a pretty active listserv. They also do archives at least once a year where you can hear about what's happening nationally with education for sustainability, and there's more information there. You can go to links and downloads. So it's an organization that we've been really fortunate to work with on an ongoing basis. And then lastly, just to remind you, that's our website coming up there, facingthefuture.org. You can download all the free curriculum resources just by clicking on our curriculum page or using the curriculum finder. And you can get in touch with me there also. I'm just Dave at facingthefuture.org. So I encourage you to explore our website and Green Teacher's website. Lots of great resources on all of those. And with that, I'm just going to quick show you what those might be and let you know about many of the ones that we have. We have free curriculum units dealing with climate change, conservation, and also consumption in the materials economy through our curriculum unit called Bayou's Toss. And stay tuned for, in the near future, we're going to be coming out with a full global issues and sustainability course. So student materials, teacher materials around integrating global issues and sustainability into a full course for high school. And lastly, some ideas for support materials. Those organizations I mentioned, so Learning for a Sustainable Future and the U.S. Partnership and our two organization websites, and 2 journal articles if you want to kind of read more about what's happening and some of the background for sustainability education from the Community Works Journal and also the Journal of Sustainability Education. I would encourage you to explore those. And again, that's my website or my address there, davidfacingthefuture.org. And with that, I am going to close and leave you with this thought from Buckminster Fuller, and thank you all for tuning in. And Tim, I guess it's time for questions next. Well, looks like
great, and thank you.
Coming up.
Oh, he's up on my screen.
Oh, there he is. Okay, thank you, Bucky.
Yeah, it's a great quote, and thank you, David. I warned everybody it was a really rich presentation, and it was you did even better. So, folks, you now have an opportunity. Some of you have asked questions, and I will retrieve a couple of them in the chat room while we're waiting for. But you have a chance now to type in a question for Dave, and then press the submit button. If you have a second question, you can a second one. And hit the submit button a second time, and I will retrieve those questions and ask them of Dave, and we'll get a bunch in before in the next 17 minutes. And those of you who want to hang around afterwards, we'll ask some more of them. So, Dave, one question that was asked in the chat room was related to Explorer West Middle School, and the question was more or less: do the teachers or students discuss and choose the themes, the sustainability themes that they focus on?
Yeah, generally my understanding of how they do that is before the school year starts, the whole staff gets together and really as a whole group brainstorm, puts ideas forward, looks at what they've done in the years past and where they want to be going in the future. And so the staff, the faculty comes up collaboratively with what their theme is going to be. And so, yeah, they've done things like global health, sustainable design. They've looked at community and what it takes to make a sustainable community. So they have some pretty creative themes throughout each year, and they work on that theme the whole year.
And Jacqueline is asking whether or not the lesson plans, Facing the Future lesson plans, have assessments attached to them.
They do, and you can look at them in a couple different ways. Some of them are going to be more formative, if you want to use that word, as far as ways of checking in and assessing where students are at. We don't do a lot of work with, kind of final exam type questions. So the assessment that we tend to do is assessing through student demonstration of knowledge. So, for example, you saw those diagrams that students created as part of the Watch Where You Step Ecological Footprint Project, and you can use those as a demonstration of student knowledge in a way of assessing if they've understood how ecological footprint works and what it means to reduce the impact or the footprint of something, for example.
Someone else is asking a question really of me, I guess, which is that can you get professional development credit? No, you can't in the strictest sense, but we always hear from a couple of people after the webinar, and usually when we send out the email tomorrow morning to everyone, which will include some of the websites that Dave's mentioned and so forth, but it also includes the URL for the archived version of tonight's or this afternoon's presentation, depending on where you are. And if you're seeking a certificate, we would be happy to send you a certificate of participation, which some people are taking to their school districts, and so it may or may not qualify. It's certainly not official in terms of credit hours, but we'd be happy to help with that if we can. Dave, while I go to the back office, I'll let you scroll through the chat room, and you can respond to any of the comments or questions that are there while I take a minute to download some questions.
Yeah, I noticed another question somebody had asked about. I think it was financing these, and that's always a tough one. Whether it be buying resources for students to use in class, or just having the funding to do projects in your community. And we do on our website have some links to opportunities for teachers to pursue funding through grants from organizations, so that might be one way to consider it. It's certainly more challenging, I know, here in the U.S. with what's happening to education budgets. So that might be one place to go, but it's never easy. But I think also, at least, we're trying to create free and low-cost resources that teachers can use in their courses. There's a question from Greg asking which resources from FTF are geared for English language learners. There's one specifically that's called Making Connections, Making Connections, Engaging Students, and that one was written for intermediate English language learners or striving readers, so be they native speakers of English who are just struggling with their progression. So that might be one resource I would encourage you to look at. You can download several of the units or the lessons from the teacher's guide and the student book to take a look at those. Otherwise, that's the most specific one, but certainly we know of lots of educators who have used our other materials in their coursework. There's a teacher here in Seattle who helped us develop Making Connections, David White-Espine, who teaches at our what's called the Bilingual Orientation Center. So it's Seattle's newcomer school for recent immigrants. And David has used sustainability as a way of creating community in his classroom, because he has students from all over the world who speak, I think, over 40 different languages. And so he's used things that are not, specifically geared towards English language learners, but he's found that because the issues that they deal with when they're talking about sustainability are so universal and because the students come from all over the world, it's very engaging for them, and it's a way of getting students who otherwise might struggle with the language to being interested and engaged in it and working with their peers on these issues. Looking at other questions here. Maybe Tim's back. I'll stop before Tim starts talking. Oh, maybe not. So it looks like Jacqueline had asked, is it possible to gain access to previous archives? Yes, those are up there, and I'll leave that to Tim to describe how to get those.
Thanks, David, and thanks, everybody, for your patience. Yes, the archives, I think we have 12 now are all on thegreenteacher.com, and click the link on the main page to archives. That'll take you to the list of the upcoming ones. We have 2 more later this month, but we have, as of 11 or 12 minutes from now, we'll or as of tonight, this particular webinar, I think this is our 13th, and all of these 12 are already available, and this one will be available tomorrow. So I've got a few questions. Let me kind of randomly pick the first one, and this question is from this one's from Jacqueline. I love the idea of having a school-wide theme that all teachers weave into their lessons, but any ideas on how to logistically get started? Get everyone on the same page and willing to participate.
That's sometimes the million-dollar question, isn't it? Yeah. We've been fortunate to work with schools in various levels of understanding and adoption and implementation of that. And certainly, if depending upon your community and your school, it can be really easy to do, and it can be much more challenging to do, depending upon just maybe even politically how people view the word sustainability, perhaps. But in our experience, I would say, it starts from just looking at where the community is at and what the community's needs are, and then looking at where you're at in your own school. And, some ways of selling it might be that it's an opportunity, to maybe reduce costs in your own school, but it's also a way of engaging students that might not otherwise be engaged. And the staff part, it's challenging, and that's one of the reasons we wanted to do this webinar, was look at ways that, sustainability doesn't have to be thought of as its own subject. It can be a way to do things just differently. As a researcher, a thinker, Heidi Hayes Jacobs, who calls it upgrading your curriculum. So it's not necessarily adding something, but you're just taking one thing and upgrading it to the 21st century, perhaps, or just to a different way of thinking about it. So, Jacqueline, I don't have an easy answer for your question. I know, for example, with Explorer West, they've been doing this for almost 10 years now, and it's still always a work in progress. And it certainly always takes a few staff members to get the ball rolling. And I think once you have that kind of core number of people and you can demonstrate that the students in your classes have been engaged by these approaches and these materials, it often helps as a kind of provide a lab for other teachers to see how to do it.
James asks, David, does Facing the Future also work with teacher educators at the university level?
We do, yeah. That's a great question, James. We don't do a great deal of it in comparison to the percentage of work that we do with K-12 schools, but we've certainly realized that that's a great leverage point to get pre-service teachers before they enter the classroom, introduced to the idea of education for sustainability, and giving them, materials and opportunities to experience and implement it in their pre-service teaching. There's an organization, the American Association of Sustainability in Higher Education, AASHE, if I got that right, that is dedicated to just that, and the U.S. partnership is involved in that also. So yeah, we've, here in the Seattle area especially, we've had opportunities to do presentations for pre-service teachers. I actually just was on a panel last night at the University of Washington for a group of biology pre-service students. So it's an important audience to work with, and I think it's especially important now as we have that growing need for more teachers, and to get them before they hit the classroom, it's usually easier to think about implementing it, because once you get there, your first year, it's really hard to think about changing things.
Great, David. Another question is, do you recommend any places online where people on this webinar can network with other teachers year-round about sustainability education?
Yeah. First of mind, what comes up? There's Curriculum 21 is a great place to go. There are lots of different groups around that. And I think even there you can link to different subgroups in different states. Specifically around sustainable education, the U.S. partnership is probably going to be the best place to go if you want to find out about different communities. And if people have other ones that they're involved in, please put them in the chat box, or answer in the question box that's up, because I know there are lots of them out there, and certainly not ones that I necessarily am aware of.
Yeah, there's one that I'm involved with, which I think actually it's called the K-12 sustainability, and I'll dig up the URL for that and include it in the email we send everybody tomorrow. Okay, another question, Dave. How about will the high school package you guys are developing, will that include understanding how the economy is financed?
Yes. Specifically, I'm not quite sure where you're going with the question, but yeah, economy is a huge part of what makes something sustainable or not sustainable, and so we will be looking at the role the economy plays, how students participate in the economy. To be honest, I don't know how in depth we might get with things like the U.S. Federal Reserve System or the recent financial crash, but I'm sure you'll probably see that playing a role to some degree or another because it's current and topical.
And a related one about you mentioned the high school sustainability course. When will that be available?
The goal is to have that ready for the 2012-2013 school year. So it's going to be pilot tested in depth this fall, and we'll be finalizing things hopefully for the following school year.
Another question. Do you guys have any suggestions for connecting sustainability with the physics high school class?
Oh, questions like that stump me in situations like this. The one that comes to mind is actually, I'm thinking back to Ben's article that was in Green Teacher, Tim, which is looking at things like sustainable design. And I'm going to defer to that, to the work Ben's done with that. And I think that's probably the best place to go. National Geographic did some stuff on that, looking at biomimicry. And there are several books out there whose names I wish I could remember right now that look at those aspects. And I think the design aspect is certainly one of them. That whole thing of looking at cradle-to-cradle design and manufacturing and distribution is what comes to mind. Let's see here. Other questions that we might have. Oh, it's like Tim says he's lost audio. Okay, well, I guess that means you're stuck listening to me. Scroll back through here and see if there are any other questions going on here. Yeah, and I'll bring back up the point that looks like Janita brought up. It says if you have the support of administration, promoting sustainability becomes a lot easier. Definitely true, and I think in the schools we've worked with, we found that to be very true, that ultimately if you want to have it be school-wide, you need to have your administration bought in. And also, mention of professional learning communities, I think is going to be more and more we find key to making sustainability an easy way to integrate into your school. So, Tim, hopefully you'll be able to get your audio back working, because I know there are other questions up there. And I guess since we can't talk to Tim, if anybody else has questions at this point, you can certainly put them in the chat box as well, because I can see them straight away that way. Let's see, Liz is asking a good question. How do you determine the developmental appropriateness of different subtopics of sustainability? Some topics can be daunting for younger students. I grapple with this. Yeah, I agree. We've struggled for a while, for example, with looking at how do you, if you talk about climate change with younger students. And to some degree, we've tended to err on not necessarily talking about climate change itself, but for younger students talking about systems and understanding how systems are interconnected, and so that when they get ready, as they get older, and it's developmentally appropriate for them to understand those larger issues of climate and change, and how global warming may be affecting planet Earth and for their future lives. If they're equipped to understand that way of systems thinking and understanding different perspectives, then they're more likely to be able to grapple with something like climate change and not feel overwhelmed by it. So that's just one example. And certainly, for example, if you look at the resources that we've created for the younger grades, there's a teacher's guide called Teaching Global Sustainability in the primary grades, and you can download the first chapter from that. And that really looks at things from a systems perspective, as looking at culture and community, and then expanding that to looking at, what's our role in the system of of the world through using food, and then looking at biodiversity and just understanding how systems work, and that's using some pretty well-known children's literature to support those understandings of what that is. So they introduce the concept of sustainability, but they're not looking at any particular issues in depth. A couple questions. Cindy asks, what curricula do you have that focus on middle school, high school mathematics besides real-world math, which I love, by the way. Thank you, Cindy. We don't have anything that's specifically about math beyond that particular resource. Certainly there are others that we have that you can download from our sites that are from the Engaging Students to Global Issues book that could be adapted for math, but that at this point is our one resource primarily focused on math. And Greg is asking, for rural schools, do you have good resources for teaching about sustainable agriculture? We have some. There's a lesson, for example, called Farming for the Future that looks at the difference between, kind of large-scale farming and then subsistence farming and the differences there. But to the degree that something like a 4-H or something might offer, we do not. And so we've been fortunate, like in our area, to work with university extensions and with conservation districts that do offer more resources for that. So we tend to bring the sustainability part, but not specifically related to agriculture.
David, I'm back. Sorry
Great.
to have disappeared there, and with no questions, I turned on. It's starting to get a little dark here in Toronto. I turned on my desk lamp and lost my audio and had to reboot my